Hey guys, Kinggath here, and welcome to another episode of the Kinggath podcast. Today's guest is somebody who has created two of the most game-changing mods for Fallout 4. Both of them, I think, can give you a whole new way to play the game. Welcome, D1v1ne122.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
I think I'm just going to go with Divine. The numbers are
Yeah. I mean, that had been just because I couldn't. I had to add the numbers because someone of course takes it before, but
yeah, of course. I'm sure Divine is already taken. Then you add more numbers. Now, is it supposed to be like D1v1ne, or is it like Leet speak? What's going on with the ones in the middle of it?
Yeah,
I couldn't find you on Nexus for the longest time because I was trying to type in Divine, and I'm like, where the hell is he?
Well, it's kind of an evolution. So before, I think the first one I used was actually Demon177, which was actually a reference to Halo back in the day, because the Master Chief is, from the Covenant side, he's the devil, right? And his Spartan number is 177. So so I was doing that first, and then it was taken. Then I switched it to 122 for some reason. And then I was like, I'll just switch to the complete opposite side. And I thought the 1v1 sounded cool because I was going to start using it on multiplayer games. So it'd be 1v1.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it ended up.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, the stories behind most people's usernames, especially if they've carried them on for a long time, are always pretty entertaining. But yeah, the numbers just threw me off. I didn't expect the ones in there when I was typing in your name trying to find, because I wanted to see if there were any mods I had missed you had done. So are there other mods you've participated in that, because the two I'm aware of are Gasmasks of the Commonwealth, and now your new big one, the Nuclear Winter. Did you do other things for Fallout before that?
Before Gasmasks of the Wasteland, no, but in the time since, I've helped a lot of people out with other mods and stuff. I was helping Max G3D with a ballistics mod where we were trying to make ricochets.
Okay.
So I helped with the scripting on that, and then I've just helped miscellaneous people as well, just with general implementation,
Sure.
Truly Britzy's gas masks. I helped with the implementation of those because he's a really good modeler. He just had no idea how to actually do the implementation and level lists and stuff. So helped out about that.
Yeah, there's a bit of tribal knowledge going on with Bethesda modding. There's a lot of knowledge that's just not in print anywhere, but a bunch of us happen to know. So if you've got friends in the right places, you can get help pretty easily to build whatever you want. But otherwise, it takes quite a bit of digging to find out how to do something like that.
Yeah.
Or at least the patience to reverse engineer everything.
Yeah, that was my struggle when I first started. Actually, Gasmasks of the Wasteland was my first mod ever.
So you haven't modded for any other game?
Well, I did some for the original StarCraft, Warcraft 3, StarCraft 2, but those were all as I was growing up, right? So
right.
My first one is
I did those as well. I count those as modding time.
Yeah.
Those were a lot of fun. Those editors were really good.
Yeah. I started that stuff when I was 7, so I was really young.
Yeah, I've got you outaged.
Yeah. Just learning how to do events and stuff, and I can make these people spawn when I walk into this area.
Yeah. Yeah. Those were a lot of fun, and they were a great new user friendly modding area because it was the map editor. It was almost like opening Microsoft Paint at first. You just click on a unit and just start painting it all over the place. I remember my buddies and we would make challenge maps for each other, and at first they tended to just be how many units could you cram into a little pile without crashing the game? It was the best we could do at the time. And then you see stuff like Dota come out, and it's holy crap.
It's people really know
awesome
how to do
this
game design stuff that aren't in the games industry yet.
Yeah. That I think some of those started my real fascination with game modding, was just playing around and then seeing what other people would release in the community and how intense it could get. But I never really got it. It wasn't until Fallout 4 I personally just decided to go full bore and be like, I'll try and design a whole game system. Let's give it a go.
Yeah, same.
You've kind of done similar with your 2 mods. Now they seem very, like, if somebody were to look at Gasmasks of the Commonwealth, they might think like, oh well, that's just one little feature, but it really isn't. It really completely changes the way you've got to approach the game.
Yeah,
like
that was kind of the goal, right? It was to take this simple thing that maybe they hadn't really thought of, like they have all these gas masks in the game, and they have a little bit of radiation resistance, but like, and then you look at games like Metro, where it's like a really core component of like traversing through the world, and like it feels very immersive, like taking off a filter and changing it, or like your visor cracking, that kinds of stuff, So I kind of wanted to bring that to Fallout and like implement it in a different way.
I mean, you guys went all out with that though. Like, I know you had Scriv do the custom overlay stuff. You've got like the hand wiping. Like, you've got all sorts of awesome features in that. It's really well done.
Yeah, I think we all really worked on like almost all parts of it. Max G3D did the animations and some of the he did a lot of the texturing. I helped with the texturing as well. At that point, like when I first, like, a lot of Gasmasks of the Wasteland was almost like a not like a Kickstarter, but like a one of those games you're like early release, right? And so when I first released it, that's when I had like just started like learning Papyrus, and I like really didn't know anything, and like I created a really like a single script that just like made a toxic environment, and then you'd have to consume these filters to prevent radiation. That was like it. I had a lot of like listed features that I wanted to implement, but I just didn't have the talent at the moment. And then people seemed to enjoy the idea of it, like Scrivener and Max G3D, and they joined onto the team, and a bunch of people have come through and helped out with the project along the way. And eventually, through them, I learned like a ton about like the actual modding process, especially Scrivener on the scripting front, because I didn't know anything. And then he came in and was like created this whole base for the mod. And then at first it looked like Chinese to me, and then I was like, all right. So like, over the next 2 years, I like started to learn what all of it was actually doing, and then eventually at this point, like, I've almost rewritten all of that now. So yeah.
It's crazy how quickly you can pick up more and look back at your old stuff and just be like, what the hell was I thinking? That happens quite a bit to me, where I go back and I want to I just want to like throw it all away and start over, but God knows I'm not going to have the time to do anything like that anytime soon.
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure Scriv, if I remember correctly, I think Scriv actually learned to program from Papyrus, so like everything he knows is like rooted in Bethesda games, which is pretty interesting. And I think he's now, as far as I know, he's now working on other programming languages, but that has to be a hell of a way to go. And then I remember the first time I saw some of his code, because I used to follow along with the development of Gasmasks when I was in the Nexus Discord server, and his code is so damn pretty. He does a real good job of keeping that clean.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like a professional programmer. it's so
right.
Like,
so when he told me he learned from Papyrus, and maybe I'm getting that wrong. Maybe it was somebody else who told me that, but I'm pretty sure it was him, and I was shocked.
Actually,
it was like, wow, you do that pretty, and like and this is your starting code.
Yeah, I actually listened to you and him's podcast yesterday, and yeah, you guys did mention that, and I was like, wow, like like I'm a computer science student, and I'm learning all these languages, and he just starts with Papyrus, and he's probably a better programmer than I am already.
I think some people it just clicks for.
Yeah,
there's just certain people that are meant to be programmers. I kind of had that realization that I was on like an artist's path, and then at some point I discovered programming, and I'm like, oh, this just meshes way better with me. But I'm kind of a sloppy person. So,
yeah, I'm sort of in
my code gets sloppy too.
Yeah, I'm sort of in that same in between. Like, I'm like halfway between art and halfway between tech, and then like programming and game design was sort of that in between that branched the two ideas. Like, I can use my tech side where I kind of like programming. I like creating game systems, and then I can use the art side to like mesh and actually give feedback to the player, and all that kinds of stuff.
Right. Yeah, he's kind of the art side is kind of given the actual life to it instead of it just because at the end of the day, I mean, all these things we're designing could easily be a MUD as well. Like it's just systems, and then it's all the graphics and fluffy stuff that makes it enjoyable for the average person.
Yeah.
So what are you? So you said you're a computer science major right now. What are you hoping to do long term in that regard? So if you're not doing this professionally already, but you obviously you've got some great demo reel pieces here with these 2 mods you've been working on.
Yeah, actually, that's what I'm working on right now is actually building my online portfolio and sending out resumes to game studios for QA and junior game design jobs. So.
Awesome. That'll be quite the transition to go right into game dev from college. I'm sure a lot of people have done it. It seems like such a foreign concept to me because when I grew up, a game industry was still so fledgling that it was kind of like people just transitioned from other careers into game development, and now it's so bizarre to me that you can just go and just like plan on being a game developer. Like, what a wonderful world we live
in. Yeah, I mean it's no walk in the park, that's for sure. Like. Just looking at a lot of the the applications, they ask for a lot of things. They expect you to be really good, and like, it's not easy to break in if you're entry. So.
Yeah, I think it's because it's one of those jobs where everyone just assumes it's going to be so much fun that they can kind of expect excessive skills from new starters and pay them way less than they're worth in the rest of the world, which is, I think the battle is really just toughing it out through those early times. But I think that's got to be easier if you do it right from college because you haven't gotten accustomed to a corporate salary yet. So it should be an easier transition than people who are trying to transition from a real work job. And I mean, not that that's not real work, but just in the sense of like, to me, it still seems like play. Like the idea of being a game developer just seems like a dream job from the perspective of like, I'm building like these boring corporate software, and then I come home and mod, and it's like, this is so much fun. Like, imagine doing this for a living.
Yeah, that's really where I found the passion for programming. Like, I don't inherently love programming, but I love what I can do with the programming, like the end result, right? Like, it's just the tool to get me to where I want to be. Like,
sure.
Yeah, like,
so worth the struggle.
Right. Yeah, like.
Yeah.
Everything that
do you find it clicks with you at all though? Like, do you find it pretty easy to learn now that you've started? Because I think that's programming, for me at least, it felt like it was very front loaded. It was very hard to wrap my head around the general concepts. But once the idea of it was like, oh, it's essentially just a series of loops and if then statements, like, I mean, it's obviously a lot more complex than that, but at the core, like, it goes down to a bunch of those. And it was like, once that clicked, I was like, okay, I can work with this.
Yeah, I mean, like, my favorite part of the actual programming process is like where I design the system and then I can watch it all come together. And the actual programming part is fun in many respects when you just like can write something and then watch it interact and change. And of course there's the bugs and there's a lot of menial things you have to do, but once you get past that, you can really fall in love with it.
Yeah, well, I obviously agree. I code so many hours a day, it's ridiculous. But it is nice. It is nice to have some art skills too to change the pace up. Like I love periodically just popping in and just designing more buildings for some settlements because it's just relaxing to like let my mind go of the hard logic of coding and just kind of like throw Legos into the CK.
Yeah, I mean, like you've mentioned before, like programming fatigue is a thing. Like you get real fatigued the longer you go on. Like I know, like after I've been programming for a few hours, like I just have to walk away. Like I can keep going for like some really easy things, but like if it's anything that I have to really deeply think about or like create distributions or use math for, I suffer. Yeah.
The one that kills me is and now I can't think of the damn word. it starts with RE. God, why can't I think of it? Where you make a function that can call itself and loops down. Recursion.
Recursion,
Jesus,
yeah,
I can't think of that
yeah.
word. Recursion like melts my brain when I start trying to do that stuff, and I usually like cheat it, and I'll end up just when I'm writing any recursion functions, I'll just make them like dump a bunch of text and just keep trying and erroring until I get it working, because like I cannot wrap my head around it. It's so difficult that it's just like probably most of the recursive functions I've ever written in my life are strictly garbage and super inefficient, and I just end up brute forcing them because it's so deep like that my mind breaks when I start messing with that stuff.
Yeah, sometimes picking up those programming concepts is pretty difficult, especially when you like first start. I found like game design kind of helps in that way sometimes. Like, I know some people pick it up easily, but like I usually learn programming through actually making my game system. So if I'm thinking of recursion and I'm like re-entering a function a bunch of times to change the output or whatever, or just use it as a loop, right? I can think of it like a game timer where I'm basically just rerunning the function every so often, or like changing the input.
Yeah, the game having the game definitely helps to get through certain things. Like when I'm laying out a new system, just knowing what I want it to look like for the player helps me answer a lot of questions as I'm going through and laying out the code of like where I'm going to need new variables or things that can be injected into. It's just thinking about like what would I want as the player, and like that helps. It's almost like I can envision it exactly in, for example, Fallout 4 or whatever, and it just makes the coding easier and a lot more fun too, because then you get that excitement of thinking like, oh, that'll be so sweet when this gets working.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, I was just telling you about the settlement systems and like thinking about how I was going to implement that. I like in my head, I can see a little bit of the implementation already like taking form, and I'm like, oh, that's the fun part. Like,
yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things I've learned in life is that those types of things I tend to try not to talk about with too many people, because the stuff that gets me excited like that, once I say it aloud and start talking to people, I get the euphoria of having finished it. So it's like that can almost be demotivating. So it's like, oh, I already got the good feeling out of it. Like I envisioned it all. So like I tend to only talk about my ideas in like little bursts with individuals. So like for example, on the Sim Settlements team, a lot of the team doesn't know what the final vision is going to be, because I almost refuse to talk about it as a whole, just for my own, because I know I'll become complacent if I do that. Whereas if I just talk about one little thing, like, hey, we need this thing, it's going to do this, and then I'll talk with another group and like, okay, we're going to need this and this, and then I know in my head how it's going to all pair together. But it rarely is. There's rarely anybody else on the team who knows exactly where it's going, for better or for worse. I'm sure there are some problems where I've created bad work product because of that, but it's this weird motivation thing, and I think most people have this problem of like, because there are tons of idea men out there, especially in the modding community. I'm sure you've gotten your share of people sending you messages where it's like, hey, I got this great idea for a mod you should make.
Yeah, usually when I get those kinds of messages, I don't necessarily like push them away, but what I'll do is I'll try to like sort of introduce them to the reality of what they need to do to start working on that. Like the first thing you probably shouldn't do is petition someone else to work on your thing. The first thing you should probably do is just build something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, the full implementation or anything, but just build a little something that shows your vision and that you're dedicated to actually making the thing. And then other people might be inspired by what you made and take up some of the parts that you're a little weaker on, or teach you how to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. In fact, I'll have just a couple of days before this actually airs, I'll have launched my new modding tutorial series, and my intro video is basically saying that, like, just get in there and play around and put stuff in the game. Because like it's like, it not only is, I don't think I brought up that point, but that's a great one. It not only is fuel for yourself to be like, oh, I can do it, I can get stuff in the game, but it also is a potential to inspire others to join you, as you found with Gasmasks, because The quality of that. If you guys haven't, anybody listening, if you haven't played Gasmasks of the Commonwealth, go play it. It's the implementation is fantastic. I mean, you could mistake that for core gameplay. Like, you guys did a really excellent job with all the animations and the overlays. Like, it's just really pro level. Is that something you strive for when you start laying out your mods? Is your end game, you're not satisfied with it until it looks damn near perfect or better than the base game?
For Gasmasks of the Wasteland, I felt like the goal was to, like, almost surpass Metro. Like, if Metro is the bar for, like, a good gas mask mechanic, where we have, like, destructibility and things showing up in the visor, right? Like, oh, well, can we one up that one little more and introduce more more systems that make it even more compelling to play with, right?
Right.
Yeah. For Nuclear Winter, that was definitely one of my goals. Was like, for Gasmasks, it had been like a work in progress kind of thing, right? It was changing a lot throughout the release cycle. So for Nuclear Winter, I really wanted to release something that felt like a complete product when I put it out there. So yeah, it was a big difference between those two. That's why I worked on it so long too.
Yeah, because you went, like you said, you went through kind of like the early access phase. But I mean, that's kind of what you have to do when you're starting out. I mean, because to do a mod at the level that you're talking, at the level you guys finally got Gasmasks to, it does require multiple people. It's not a one-man job to do something like that. And so, but like you said, you put it out there and you got some people supporting you, and then you were able to kind of hit your vision. Now with Nuclear Winter, I know you had access to some of those people because you had gotten yourself a reputation of knowing what you're doing and being helpful. And Nuclear Winter, again, another one of those like total game changing, just completely changes the feel of the game. And you and I have had discussions, and maybe we'll talk about some of that stuff here because people listening to this would be interested about some other features you want to implement. And because I know you're the type of person that will figure stuff out and you work with other people in the community, I was happy to share my knowledge with you and like help get you up to speed on the stuff you needed in order to implement that. And like that's like real. It's another thing that comes out of just trying stuff and putting it out there. So I think that was the smart way to go with Gasmasks. But I can also see you're wanting to release something, a full product. It's funny that you did that with us. We right now are experimenting the other direction. Is we went with Conqueror. We did kind of an early access release. Like, we were just like, all right, when we released Rise of the Commonwealth, we tried to do it as a complete package. It was super buggy and super broken, and so it's like, all right, well, instead, since we know our stuff's going to end up super buggy and broken, let's just release a little chunk of it and let people chew through it, and we'll get it fixed, and then release more to it. But I don't know which way is better. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think both have definitely a benefit. It's like there are definitely times when I felt like, I should just release Nuclear Winter. Like, I have like most of the gameplay systems done. Like, why am I still just holding this thing back? And it's like, I mean, really, a lot of it, like most of the actual development time went into like the actual aesthetics of like releasing the mod, like the mod page, the videos explaining the gameplay, and those kinds of things. Like, and I was also in beta for like for almost like 2 months. Now a lot of that was like, I'm in university, I'm doing classes, taking long periods of time off to actually just like, if I just keep doing this fine thing, then my grades are gonna suffer. So yeah.
But you still have a lot. You still have a lot of plans for it, though, right? Because I think looking at, I don't remember if you had much on your mod page, but just from what we discussed, that you have quite a bit still in mind that you want to do in that mod.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, the settlement system is like the forefront of my mind, like in terms of things I want to work on it for. So.
Yeah, the games that you listed as your inspirations are like some of my favorite games ever. So again, another reason where I leaped to help you, because it's like I love the Metro series. I actually haven't had a chance to play the most recent one. Have you played through that?
No, I haven't either, actually. I just didn't have the cash on hand.
No damn time. Yeah, for me it was just time. It's just like I have a half stack of PS4 exclusive games I picked up with the intention of playing through, and I still haven't gotten to those. So I'm like, why stop buying games you're not going to play? But like, because I really want to go through. I'm a sucker for single player narrative experiences. Love those games. I think maybe more than Bethesda RPGs just due to time. Because you can sit down and play through them for 20 hours and you get a good experience. Whereas the Bethesda games, I feel like you got to be prepared to put in a couple hundred hours to get the full experience. And I just finding 200 hours anymore is pretty challenging for me. But Metro, the new one looks amazing. But anyway, the point I was getting at is you listed Metro and Frostpunk, and love that game. Fantastic. I don't know what you would call that. It's not really an RTS.
It's like a survival city builder. Is what I would call it.
Survival city builder.
Or
yeah,
like resource management. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a fantastic game, and the aesthetics are beautiful. Just a fantastic looking game.
Yeah.
And then the other one you listed was Division, and I actually got really into the Division for a while. I liked it. It was great for. I hated it as a software as a service. Like I think that game model is just god awful. Mm-hmm. But I loved it at first. Like playing through it once was fantastic. Like going through all of the raids and stuff, and I loved their system where you had to build up the I don't remember what that building was called, where you had to where you would go out and do missions and you'd come back and this place would be upgraded more and more. Like I really liked that gameplay. So all three of those games, huge fan of. So then the fact that you cited those, I was like, all right, well, downloading this mod immediately.
Yeah, those are the kinds of inspirations where I'm like, well, I think I could take this system and this system and this system, and they're all winter related, and if I could all put them all together in one package, that'd be really cool, right? So those are the kind of things I like. But I also tend to not want to go too overboard, and I don't really want to change the base game. Usually what I like to do is complement the game's exploration and building systems instead of necessarily replacing the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah, that was one of the big differences between what you did and Frostfall. Frostfall feels like it guts the entire game, and you're changing the whole thing, where yours is just kind of like a new feel and some new extra bits to worry about, but it doesn't, you don't take out all the factions or the quests or anything. It's like a complement to the existing stuff, which that's my personal mod preference too as well. I want to add on to the existing experience as opposed to replacing it completely.
Yeah. I in some of these cases I purposely don't look too deep into the implementation because I don't want to be too influenced or feel like I'm missing things. I actually just I looked at the general features and mechanics that it had, and then I was like, mm-hmm. Oh, those would make sense in any winter scenario. So I take those kinds of things and then I build my own things on top of that.
So now, do you have the same goal you did with Gasmasks, which you laid out nicely, which was to just take Metro's implementation as the baseline? Are you doing that same kind of idea with this mod of being like, all right, I'm going to take, say, for example, the heater mechanic or the heat mechanic of Frostpunk and use that as my base and try and enhance it? Same with, and I assume at some point you're going to try and get Gasmasks fully integrated with this so that they can work together. Sorry, that was two questions.
Yeah. Well, I can answer one of them real quick. Is Gasmasks is actually already integrated, in a sense, because actually a long time ago, even before this is probably actually one of the inspirations that actually made me want to start Nuclear Winter, was when I was creating the environmental overlay effects for Gasmasks of the Wasteland. I knew there were some winter mods that added wintry weather, like NAC. So I was like, it'd be pretty cool if you started getting frost on your screen eventually. Over time it would just start building up, and then eventually you'd have to clean it and stuff. So that's actually been in Gasmasks of the Wasteland for a really long time. Now I wouldn't say it works with every weather mod that has winter weather, because the classifications on weather make it such that you can't inherently determine that there is winter weather happening.
Okay.
There is snow.
So do you have to individually acknowledge each one?
Right. Every weather mod that has snow, I have to actually go in and say, this is a snow weather. Now, thankfully I created a little API so that people can, add their own for that. But
sure.
But in general, I have to get each one. So That's really the difficulty of it.
Yeah, and that's always been a problem in general with modding, is trying to get all the different mods to talk to each other, because there's so much work involved in that, and especially like those of us who are building these complex system mods, we have so many ideas and stuff we were working on ourselves. Like the idea of then trying to find every other mod that might potentially have some sort of integration and make sure it works with ours is a real chore. Like there's a lot involved in that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Probably 90% of the bug reports I get are people who think that there's a bug or the mod isn't starting, and then it turns out that they were missing MCM, or they were missing F4SE, or they didn't do they didn't add the like standard custom INI edits, like those kinds of things. Because there's Nuclear Winter has a lot more mods that it requires to actually function. So like you've said before, it raises the barrier to entry, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is one of those things where like Fading and I were recently talking about how we really want to see mod packs come, is because it'll solve problems like that, to where if all those mods are required, if they could be set up in a nice, like that what's the one that everybody, well, some people are pissed about from Skyrim, Automaton, is that what it's called?
Yeah, Automaton.
Yeah, like that to me just seems like that's what we need in the community, because then you could set up some sort of script installer to be like, all right, here's all the mods that you need to make this work, here's the INI files, blah blah blah, and you just one click and go. I think that's what most people need. We're an impatient bunch now, gamers. Like, we've got everything's handed to us on a silver platter from all these game companies competing with each other. Like, then to ask the average person to go through all these hoops just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say no to it, right? Like, if it's convenient and it helps everyone, and if it gets more people into modding, hey, that's just more people to click and look at your stuff, right? So.
Yeah. Well, the people who are against it, generally it's because they know that then the attention's going to go to the person who put together the mod pack, as opposed to the individual artists who put in all that work.
Yeah, that does happen sometimes.
I don't know what the solution to that is. I think that happens anyway. I think even when people just look at a mod list, they don't fawn over the individual mods. They're basically just like trying to follow these instructions and just quickly downloading them all. Like, in my latest Let's Play, what I do is let the audience decide what mods I'm going to play with. I make some determinations based on what I think will fit, but for the most part, all I'm doing is I open the mod, read the few lines of the description. If it sounds like it'll work well with what I'm doing, I hit download and let it go, and I don't think about it again. I definitely make an effort to give everybody endorsements, and I comment on the ones I really had a good time with, but I would say 80% of them, I couldn't tell you who made the mods, and I think that's not, so I think that already is happening. So I always find the objection based on the idea that you're not going to get recognition to be questionable, because it's like if you're competing with all of these other mods that put in a crazy amount of effort, then if your mod is a smaller piece of that, you're never going to get the recognition that somebody who puts in a lot more hours than you. It's just the nature of things. Like, people only have so much attention to divide and to pay attention to, and like the people who have fostered reputations for their modding are going to get more attention than people who just throw out one mod or throw out a mod every few months, as opposed to like people like Eleonora or Nero or Reg2K, who have just like a crazy collection of high quality mods. Like, those people are obviously, their stuff's going to get a lot more attention.
Yeah, of course. Like, some of those people release things that almost no one else can really do, right? Or very few in the community have the patience and ability to build those kinds of deep systems. So,
oh man, patience. That is, God, you got to have so much of that with this. I think yesterday I spent like 5 hours trying to get an AI package working. Like, you got to commit sometimes. If you want to make certain things work.
Oh yeah, like I for Gasmasks of the Wasteland, that was actually one of the things I was like sort of toying with, was like, because I have the ability, if you shoot NPCs with gas mask on, you actually can like break their gas mask and they'll start.
That would be. They
start suffocating. Yeah. But I don't actually have like any AI to actually change that. But I was looking at ways where like could I make them panic and like run towards the nearest person who has a gas mask or is dead on the ground, take their gas mask and then put it on? Like, but
man, that would be so cool to see.
Yeah, I just couldn't figure the packages out quite, so it was
they're really wonky, and sometimes you'll have them set up perfectly fine and they just won't fire correctly, and it's really disappointing. But yeah, something like that would be amazing. And in fact, especially if you've got access to somebody who can animate, like you could even do you could even do if they can't find anybody, like holding their hands up to their throat like they're choking. Like you could do some pretty sweet stuff.
Yeah, those were.
So are there? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, those were things we were thinking about when we were first making the mod. Like early on, we were like, well, what happens when your filters runs out? Like, do you immediately start dying, or like do you is it like an iMod fade to black kind of thing where you're choking and then you just die, or is it the radiation? You're breathing in radiation, so you take a bunch of radiation damage, that kind of stuff. Or I think Max G3D at one point really wanted to do something kind of like that. Like if you die from radiation, you like hold your hands up to your throat and like crumple to the floor or whatever.
Some of that stuff is like, it's a whole bunch of work, and I think players only appreciate it the first time, and then after that they're just like, all right, I'm done, I'm bored. Like, skip it. Because I could see that being I'm also thinking in my head of like, have you seen that mod that lets companions come and resurrect you?
Yeah. I've actually used that before.
Can you imagine if you black out and then all of a sudden you wake up and it's like Nick Valentine is screwing in a filter into your gas mask for you or something?
Oh, that'd be so cool.
Really awesome.
That'd be really cool.
But man, the amount of effort that would go into that. Like you're talking like paired animations for all the characters, and script to prevent you from dying, and then an AI package. Like it would just be a big giant mess to set up, and then I think it'd be one of those things where people would be blown away the first time they see it. But most people would just be like, all right, skip the animation.
Yeah, well, that's definitely one of the things that we encountered. Was we made some animations for like changing the filters and things for specific gas masks. We did it for the one that Dogtooth made for us, which is like the M1A211, and then there were two of the vanilla ones that we also did, and they all had custom animations for taking them on, taking them off, changing their filter, and we had one for wiping, but we would have had to make one for every single mask. So eventually, unfortunately, we just kind of we left those ones, of course, because we had them done, but we didn't actually end up making any more just because it was a lot of work. And people
at least in first person, most of them all they generally doesn't matter. So like
I actually cut the ones in first person, and I actually impose them on every other mask. But like for the ones in third person, I had to like force it back to first person if they were using a different mask.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, you have to essentially make one to match the position. Plus, you got to like cut the filter off of it. Like, just a whole lot of extra work.
Yeah, I had to do a whole lot of wonky stuff for that, because especially third person. Because I mean, if you play the animation, that doesn't mean your mask comes off, right? Like you have armor. You have armor on your head that has a model.
Right.
So I had to unequip the armor, play the animation, and then time it so that or when they put it on, make sure it plays right at the end so that it adds the armor back on.
Yeah, and then what's really frustrating with that is that inevitably there's some people out there who their scripts get laggy, and that doesn't happen timely, and it just looks all terrible for them.
Oh yeah. Or sometimes it doesn't play at all because the animations are cute or whatever, and they're like, my first person animations aren't playing, or my third person, or sometimes they're only playing sometimes. So like, that's just kind of the way things go sometimes.
Yeah, it's always a bummer because you put in all that effort to make things as perfect as you can, and then the engine hiccups on you. It's really frustrating. I actually had that realization the other day. I heard some people talking. So we have a Discord for people developing content for Sim Settlements, and somebody made a comment about how like somebody was trying to mod Sim Settlements, and they were getting frustrated with the fact that like they're pretty sure the bug in their mod is actually in Sim Settlements, and they have no control over it. It's like, man, that's exactly how I feel about fallout sometimes of like, man, this is out of my control. I can't do anything about it. It really sucks.
Sometimes it's really hard
and that's,
to determine whether it's actually you or Fallout 4,
right.
like, or is it the user, right? Like,
right. All these variables in there.
Yeah, these are all things that you have to, like, if I'm like helping a user figure out why their thing isn't working, it's like I'll have to go through a whole lot of different steps to figure out, okay, is it me? Is it them? Is it Fallout 4?
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's tough, and I for me, it's gotten down to the point where I just say like, all right, can you replicate the problem with only my mods installed? If so, I'm happy to dig in and bug fix it. But like, if it's, if you come at me with a 200 mod load order and give me a weird problem I've never seen before, it's probably like, it's probably you, man. Like, it's gonna be. Because like the alternative is, if I accept responsibility, like what am I supposed to install your 200 mods? And there's another beautiful thing for something like a mod pack. Imagine if users could just like upload their plugins.txt and their INI file into a program, and it would generate a mod list that us authors could just download as a profile in what's the program, Vortex, and then boom, we've got your load order. We have to let it run in the background and download all those mods, but man, that would be amazing for troubleshooting if I could just replicate somebody's load order that quickly.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I mean, a lot of the reason I don't fix all those things, because I don't have your load order. I don't know all the interactions that your mods are having, or like what your save state is, right? Like, it can be a lot. It depends a lot on your save state.
Right. Yeah. Save state is especially, but it's amazing. It's not clear anywhere. Like, if you're new to modding, or if you've just you mod like lightly, it can take a while before you learn the fact that you shouldn't uninstall mods after you start a game with them. Like, I don't think a lot of people have picked up on that, because it seems a lot of people seem shocked when I be like, have you ever uninstalled a mod in the middle of this playthrough? I'm like, yeah, of course. What do you mean? Like, why wouldn't I? There's some mods I play and I don't like them, so I get rid of them. It's like, yeah, well, you probably broke your save.
Yeah, or you should never update a mod that is part of your save, right? Because that'll usually always.
Well, it depends on how they're done. Like, I've made sure that SimSeldons can be updated midway through, and like the key to it is really just you can never change the signatures in your scripts. You can never delete form ID or delete forms. Like, there are certain things you can do to make mods updatable mid playthrough, but removable, definitely not. Especially if you use scripts, because then you get all those orphaned instances in there.
Right.
But Fallout 4 is easily one of the best games I've seen for handling of removing content mid-game. So, like, even though, we're saying that you can probably break your saves, I've also seen your save can survive through quite a lot, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it can. Like, there are times when I think, like, oh, if I remove this or if I add this, it'll probably break everything, and then it doesn't. And you're like, huh, well, that was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of playing with my latest playthrough. Like, I don't have enough time to play to get really invested in a character. Like, personally, when I play Bethesda games, what really gets me hooked is that when I just try and make it so immersive where all I want to do, every night after work is just like binge. And since I can't do that, I'm not really getting invested in the character. So instead, I've decided I'll just have fun with them, and I just keep adding and removing mods just to see how long I can go with this character before he falls apart. Which is a fun way to play, to like, ignore all of the warnings that I give everybody else all the time.
Yeah, that's usually my problem too. Is like, once I start a playthrough, I'm like, now I want to play this all the time, and it makes it pretty tough. But once I actually started modding, my playtime actually really fell, because I was always like, every time you go in, you're like, oh, there's a bug. Oh, I guess I'm gonna go out. Right. I'm gonna go fix that.
I don't think I've had a single play session where I haven't noticed a bug in my own mods where I'm like, crap, and I just jot it down. I'm like, all right, I'll get to it next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, on top of that, it's always like you start playing and you start thinking of new mod ideas too, or like improvements you can make to your mods. Like,
right.
Man, I would rather be making that. That seems like more fun.
You find something in like your core gameplay loop for your mod that you're like, that could really be improved. Like, I'm finding too many filters. Like, okay, I kind of understand. Well, I guess I do need to go change the level list a little bit, pull out some of those filters, make it a little harder.
I read, I don't remember where I read this. It might have been some comment in a Discord server I'm in, but somebody said they know somebody who works at a game company, and most of the artists there don't play any games. They're just hipster artists who like to solve problems, and so they don't play games at all. They just like to design them. And I was like, yeah, I could see how that could happen. Like if I had learned to make games before I got hooked on playing them, I probably would never want to play them ever.
Yeah, I think that's the trap that some developers fall into, is they get really absorbed in making games, and then they maybe fall out of touch a little bit with the audience, you know.
Yeah. That's probably one of the reasons why you see so many game companies, like they'll get stuck repeating the same formula, and then they get taken out because somebody else comes up and is able to reinvent the format from fresh eyes.
Yeah, for sure.
I think there's concerns we're seeing that with Bethesda, that they're like losing touch with what the secret sauce was that makes their games work. Because there's a lot. I mean, I'm personally not of that mindset with Fallout 4. I think Fallout 4 was a great game. I think it has some flaws, like the story kind of pushes you into one direction, makes it kind of hard to RP, and there's not a lot of choice in the way you complete quests.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think it's a fantastic game overall, an improvement to the Fallout formula on a lot of layers. But I think most people are seeing now between Fallout 4 and then 76 that Bethesda kind of peaked with Skyrim, and there's a lot of people who even think Skyrim was a step back, like that they because they're simplifying so many game systems that it was actually not going in the wrong direction. I disagree with that. I think Skyrim was just a masterpiece. What do you think about Bethesda's direction lately?
I think they do streamline sometimes to reach like the core audience a little, or reach bigger audiences, but I don't think they streamline so much that they abandon their core values in the game or anything. Like if you look at Oblivion to Skyrim, right? Like, yeah, they simplify some stuff, but they also improve and add a lot of whole brand new things that are really awesome, right? And they did the same thing with Fallout 4. They added a lot of really cool features. Not all of them are completely fleshed out, which,
right.
A lot of us end up taking on as our own personal responsibility to add more features to, but the fact is they are trying new things, and not all of it's going to work out. Like, I don't think the dialogue with system was necessarily the best, but
it definitely makes making quest mods a challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah. But I think they do take their feedback, and they know that, their next game, every game is really important, right? Because they have such a long development cycle. So,
right.
Yeah. I mean, even
you can't afford to have too many duds in the midst of all that.
Yeah, I mean, even 76 has some really nice things to it. Like, I've played through it. I did the campaign. I enjoyed it. I mean, I'm not playing it currently because I'm not that interested in the core gameplay loop of just finding new legendaries per se. I really like a narrative, but
right.
But the actual initial playthrough was really fun. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I always view the MMOs and the software as a service games. Is like, I'm happy to play through them once, playing through. I actually did get hooked on both World of Warcraft and Destiny for a long time, where I grinded through the end game. But once I broke free of that spell and realized what I was doing, I was basically playing a what's that old? I'm trying to remember that old experiment with rats and pigeons where they figured out how many times they had to push a button and give them a treat. And it was like, I'm basically I'm an experiment. I'm a rat being experimented on by Blizzard. Like, this is no good.
You're Pavlov's dog, right?
right. So I needed to break free of that loop, and now I despise end game loops like that. But yeah, I can definitely appreciate them going through once. I found 76 hard to go through. Like, I had to I think I made it to level 20, and barely scratched the surface of the game map, just because I felt so disconnected without characters living there. I think that was playing 76 made me realize how important having that living world of characters, even though they're AI and they're really bad AI generally in Bethesda games, just having those characters I knew living their lives made the rest of it more impactful to me for some reason. I haven't quite put my finger on why it's so important, but it's something in that vein. Like, having those living characters in there makes it feel like what I'm doing matters.
Yeah.
Even though, if you pull back far enough, you're like, well, nothing matters. Like, it doesn't. especially in a game. But there's something about it that helps with the immersion and helps me pull it along where that holotapes just weren't able to do.
Yeah.
But I can definitely appreciate the detail in that game world. Like, it was beautiful. You got really good looking stuff in there, and they added some really cool improvements to like the user interface. Especially, I thought they made some massive improvements too for 76.
Yeah, I think on the NPCs for sure. Like I could definitely feel that. Like it removes the suspense of every single quest when you know that every single person that you interact with or you're going to go save is already dead, right? Like, you're going to find their body, and it's going to...
Right.
Yeah. It also...
That might have been a mistake. And when I read through those quests, the way they're set up, it almost feels like it wasn't originally planned to have everybody dead.
Yeah. But
like, if maybe that was a development choice later, that because those quests end up falling flat and they didn't need to, because it could have been, and I guess you could only do it for so long where you're drawing people's hopes out. But if there were some even pockets of NPCs, it could have been like really impactful when you find, if you go through 3 quests and everybody's dead, and then you finally find somebody alive, it would have been like, holy crap, that took forever.
Yeah, you go into some little bunker and you find out, oh my god, there's actually civilization down here. Some people survived the Scorch Beast. They went and fled underground, and they're this little pocket of civilization that survived, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also feel like it might have been the case when I dig through some of the loose files. I found tons and tons of NPC voice files, not holotapes, but like actual, like there's all of the settler voices are still in the 76 files, and then they even have a lot of this is interesting. I was actually hoping to be able. We're not allowed to backport, unfortunately, now that we've learned that they don't even want us forward porting. Like, obviously they put the nix on people doing the Fallout 3 remake project and using the voices.
Yeah.
But there are, in 76, they have all the voices for the settlers from Fallout 4. And they had, so you know how Bethesda uses like the same handful of voice actors and you can recognize their voices across games?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
A lot of the voice actors that they use regularly recorded all of the settler lines too, but they didn't use them because they probably wanted those voices to stand out. Like, there's a set of settler voices in 76 files that sound like Nick Valentine. I was like, oh, that would have been such a fun resource to bring in to Fallout 4, or like obviously I would love to see settlers in 76. So it does. There's a lot of evidence that points to the fact that 76 probably was going to have living people at some point, and then during development something came about that made them scrap that. I have no idea what it could be, but
maybe they felt like with other people there, it broke the immersion too much to have some random people jumping around shooting the NPCs, or like they couldn't figure out how to make those states where you need some NPCs alive. You can't let just anyone go and kill them.
Right.
So like how do you work that? And they probably just couldn't find a way around it. So they're like, it's cheaper, less voice acting, right? If we don't have these NPCs, less to manage. So we'll just put the story on the players and make their experiences their personal story. But unfortunately, I think a strong narrative is quintessential to any Bethesda game for replayability. To be honest, I think that's what keeps people, is the ability to experience the story from a different perspective with a different character, different personas. That kinds of stuff really keeps people playing the game.
Yeah. No, it's funny about that is I don't, like, personally, like, when I go into Skyrim, I don't even complete the main quest anymore. I tend to like I know certain quest lines I really want to do, or I'll be like, all right, I want to play, I want to play a stealthy character, so I'm going to go do the thief quest line and the Dark Brotherhood, but I want to avoid the mages, and so I might not even do the main storyline. But I think there's something about having it in there. It almost, I don't know how. It's almost like a central lifeline. It's like like that's there, and then when you're veering off and doing other things, you're doing that, and it makes you feel like gives you that feeling of choice almost, of like, I know, and like, it's not even an active thinking. It's not even something I actively think about, but I've always been trying to figure out the secret sauce to Bethesda games, and it seems to me it's something like that, of along the line of because you're ignoring the main quest, it makes it feel like you made that choice and that you're RPing because of that fact. And without that to root, what is a choice if you don't have the non-choice, I guess. I don't know,
yeah.
Getting into abstract talk that I don't know how to do, but if there is no main quest line to branch on, to avoid, then are you making any choices at all, or are you just playing a linear game?
Yeah, that's what I really like about games like Divinity Original Sin is like they go back to those, like, I would almost call it old school RPG where like you could be a villain, right? You could be a bad guy. Like it's offering that freedom of choice of really role playing the personality that you actually really want. Like how many people actually play an evil person or a raider? Probably a lot of people at some point, because they go through and they probably play a more normal character or however they imagine themselves. Right. And then they go through and, one or two or three playthroughs, they might say, I'd want to be a raider at some point. I'd like to be able to make people's lives a little miserable.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine the conversation at game companies is like, especially now that they have all of this research data available, because I'm sure like Steam returns to them as much data as they want from users as far as how their games are being played, is like they can see things, for example, how many players do make those choices and stuff. And my bet is, given that most of the industry has gone to linear games, is that what they find is that only a small percentage of people actually replay their games, and only a small percentage go down the dark path, so that it's like, all right, well, why are we putting in all of this development? Because it takes the same amount of development. Like if you're going to design, 2 story paths even, or if you're going to do a complicated branching one like those older games did, where you could kind of shift in and out and get into gray areas and stuff.
Yeah.
Like if those they multiply the development time, and if it's you do all that and it only 10% of your player base ever sees more than the good guy line, then like was it worth it? Like was the juice worth the squeeze there? Because like it probably, the most people who aren't going to see that anyway, it's not going to change whether or not they enjoyed the experience, like having that option or not. So then it's kind of it's almost like one of those features that's only appreciated by purists, and that's why it's becoming less and less of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at it, like really any of the big games that included modding, though, usually those choices were the reason that people did go back and actually play them multiple times. You go back to Knights of the Old Republic, right? You can be Sith, you can be Jedi. Obviously, the result is the same, but I can bet there's a whole bunch of people that went back and played through that game a bunch of times just to experience it from like, oh, I'm a neutral Jedi, or maybe I never became a Jedi. I always used weapons, right, instead of a lightsaber.
Right.
Those kinds of things really give the ability to give the game longevity, and those really bring in modding communities as well. Like anytime that you have those kinds of narrative systems like Paragon versus Renegade, you give the opportunity for modders to build systems around those things. So
yeah, I think it's a great way to build brand loyalty. Like you can capture people's imaginations and let them kind of run wild with it and get hooked on it. Almost at the same level of like the software as a service games. Like people get totally hooked into some of those games to where they're just committing massive amounts of hours. And this is almost, but I guess the difference between this model and that model is that model you get money every month. So it's no wonder the industry's going in that direction. But
yeah. I can understand it, but at the same time, like, well, I like good games.
Hey, grumble. I want it the old way.
Yeah.
I do think one of the things that I'm seeing is we're starting to see so like the way I've always looked at the games industry with it is that there were us hardcore nerds early on when it was starting, and we got used to the simple games. We mastered them. We got hooked on them, and we were hungry for more and more advanced stuff. And then the next level of audience came in, like the console players came in, and they needed simpler stuff. So then our games started getting dumbed down. Well, now that group, who was much larger than us initial adopters, is now they're getting aged into a point where they're wanting more complex stuff. And I think we're going to soon get to the point where, especially because now every kid who comes up is used to having video games. It's not like there were these generations that didn't have them at all, or generations that only had them for a little while. Like all generations now are just going to be used to games, and it's just part of their lives. Is that by the time they grow up, those people are going to be ready for the more advanced games. And I feel like we're already seeing it, because the games that come out and that get popular are much harder and much deeper than the games I started with. So like the games that were popular when I was younger. So I think we're going to see eventually we get back to those old school games being more of the regular, as people are just ready for more complex systems right away. So like if you compare, for example, all the depth in combat in something like PUBG compared to like Doom originally, like there's just so much more you can do in the game, and people are happy to do it. You have millions of players playing these games, and like that's a much more complicated experience than the first experiences we had in those genres. So I think people are, and then, or you look at why can't I think of it? Dark Souls, like how hard that damn game is, and like how popular it is still. Like people, I think there's a certain level of complexity people are willing to accept as a baseline, and I think it goes up over time.
Yeah, I mean, you offer the ability for player diversity, right? You can be a mage, you can be a soldier. I mean, it changes your gameplay style and how you experience the game. So a lot of people go through and they play it multiple times, right? Because they want to challenge themselves in different ways. So I'm sure if that game had modding tools, I would bet there'd be a lot of mods for it. There probably are mods.
Oh, yeah. There probably are, yeah. People always find a way to hack into these games and make crazy mods for them.
Yeah.
Which is, I love the DIY community that does stuff like that. I mean, that's how games used to be modded. It was, excuse me, it was very rare that people would release the editors for their games. And I actually think the games that ended up doing the best tended to be the ones that did release their editing tools. Like the ones that most of the games that I remember most fondly from throughout my childhood are ones that happen to have editing tools. So like all the Blizzard RTS games, like Quake always had a development kit. I'm pretty sure the original Doom had its hit. Oh yeah, you had the Source. Even before that, I think it was called something else before Source. Maybe not. I can't recall. But yeah, I remember playing in the original Half-Life 1 editor a lot. Yeah, those were... I played more of those games than any other when I had an editor to play with.
Yeah, for sure. Like, those were sort of my Minecraft of the childhood, right? Like, those are my creative output where I could be like, oh, I'm going to go in and I'm going to make my own campaign, right? I'm going to make a storyline and then I'm going to play through it. I'm never going to release it, but... But I'm going to play through it. And then you go onto battle.net and you see all these cool custom games that people made. And you're like, oh, I guess maybe I could do something more complicated where I do have some kind of game mode, That really gets people into like game development and into replaying those games, right? Because you even build... you build loyalty to the game because you've spent so much time in it, right? That's how MMOs hook you, right? They give you a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's the sunk cost thing. Where you're just like, all right, well, I've already invested this much time and energy into it. I might as well keep going in.
Right, yeah.
So did you ever find with the, stuff like, you talk about the stuff other people release, like in, for example, StarCraft with the scenarios where you could browse through them and stuff. Did you ever find you would start playing other people's and then just become a little deflated of like, I don't know how to do any of this? Or instead of being motivated, you're just like, I suck.
Yeah, something like the tower defense stuff for sure. I was like, how did they turn off that thing and make that thing turn back on? They make it so I can only place here and here and here and here and here. But it's just like, there were obviously some programmers back then who knew how to take those tools and work them right.
I'm trying to figure out what it was like. Where was the difference? And I think it just comes down to just time invested and you pick up and apply your other life skills to it. But because that was definitely something that I battled when I was younger and trying to mod, is that I would have all these awesome ideas. Well, not awesome to me. I'm sure they were terrible, but awesome ideas that I wanted to implement, and I would start doing some of it, and then I would like find somebody else's mod and their implementation was so damn near perfect, and then I'd look back at my thing and be like, that is, that's unusable garbage. Get deflated, and then stop for a while. But at a certain point in my life, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I see what they did. Let me like reverse engineer it. And I don't know what exactly caused that. If it was just a matter of like I had enough experience to feel comfortable to do that, or if it was. Yeah, I don't know what it was, but the reason I'm curious about this, and I'm curious about your thoughts on it too, because you also have said you've done modding through some of those older games. Is do you recognize what the change was? Where was the point, the turning point for you? Because I would like to instill that feeling to others, and there's a lot of people who, like we talked about earlier, we briefly mentioned there's those idea men who throw those ideas out at you. Like there's a lot of people in the modding community who are players. And I said this recently on another podcast that I think that the people who are really seriously into modding, even just modding as players, have the game developer gene. They've got that itch to create their perfect game, and that's why they put so much time into it. Is like I want to give them some hope that like there's a way to get past that feeling of there's no way I can get this good, because you can. Like everybody, we all, any of us who have done this stuff and who now have popular followings, we've all went through that crap of trying to grow through it, and our stuff sucking and not being releasable. So do you recall? So you've said you've had some of those moments where you look at other people's stuff. How do they do that? I'll never be able to do that. Do you recall when you got past that? For example, like with was Gasmasks your breakthrough? Because you said you'd done some modding before. Or was it partway through Gasmasks? Was what was your experience with that?
That was part of it. I think a lot of it is like confidence in my technical capacity. So I would work on like Warcraft 3 stuff, right? And then I know StarCraft 2 is coming out, and I'm like, I want to be on the floor when that thing releases. I want to be like one of the first mods that comes out or whatever. So I start working on that, and I start doing some really cool stuff, and I'm like, whoa, I can actually do some really cool things. Like I created like a sort of a wave-based defense game. I didn't finish it because of school, but that kind of showed me like, if I knew a little bit more about this, about programming, or like if I spent more time, then I could probably become really good at this. And then I used mods for a long time in Skyrim. I did some level editing in Skyrim with my brother. For a long time we were actually working on a mod called Remnant of Kings that never ended up getting released, but we created a bunch of levels, and we spent a long time in the editor working together, and that kind of showed that this we can do a lot of this. Like I started messing with things other than just the level editor, right? And then in Fallout, I was like, I had the passion to build certain systems, and now I had the programming ability to do some of that. But really, a lot of it you don't even need programming ability. It's just the will to go and learn to do it, right? you learn a little bit, and then you learn a bit more, and then you learn a bit more, and it all builds on, and then eventually you can do really complicated things where at the beginning you thought, oh, I could never do that, but like you can. You just have to start somewhere, start small, and then build your way up, right?
Yeah. I think you just hit it on the head there, though, is that it's you keep coming back, and each time you have a little bit more skill from whatever you've done, plus from your last attempt, that then like things just start clicking a little more, and you can get a little bit further along. So I think one of the things that is what often deflates is you set up this big grand project for yourself, and realize that you only have a fraction of the skills necessary, and then you get deflated because your focus was on that particular project and not necessarily on the just trying things and slowly learning. And I think it's a trap I think we just all naturally fall into of we try and bite off more than we can chew. Of like we set into mod because we're like, all right, I have the idea for. I did this all the time in my youth. I would come up with I have a bunch of old, and I still have them thanks to my mother being a hoarder. I have these old design documents I would make for entire video games, and I would do these when I was like 10, and like have a full fighting game laid out, like all the characters and their moves, and it's like. And then I would start to try and do it, and it's like, you're 10, man. You don't have the skills to do anything like this. And eventually that would settle in, and then I would just, give up. But it was only, then eventually I get to a point where I'm at now, where it's like I've had all this time programming and everything. Then when I set down with this massive project, it's like, oh, okay, well, this is attainable. I just have to do it in small little chunks. It's ironic that now I understand I got to go in small chunks, even though now I have the skills. If I had been able to like, temper my imagination a little bit when I was younger, I probably would be much further along now, because I would have if I would have just figured out that basic thing of like, just aim for little things, just knock out one little piece at a time, and if you connect each of those things to the last thing you were working on, you slowly build up into something pretty impressive. But instead, it would just be like just rage quit because I wasn't meeting these crazy expectations I set for myself.
Yeah, I really wish that I had started doing that earlier on and like started building small games when I was younger, or like early on in college, because those kinds of things really add up. Like I've seen people who they don't necessarily make the biggest games, but they sure know how to make small games, and they can make a lot of them, and they're very talented.
Sure.
So starting small, just starting like really simple, just do the really simple thing, and then you'll be able to do much bigger things not even too long after, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think but it's really hard to control the urges to do the big thing right out of the gate.
Oh yeah.
Which is I don't know how to tell people to avoid that trap, other than like, if you're willing, if you're the type of person who can listen to somebody giving you advice and accept and take it, which is a rare trait, then that would be my advice to people. It would be like, just start really small.
Yeah, and you set yourself up.
Make something happen, and then slowly just work on that. Like enhance that little thing until you happen across a new nugget of knowledge somebody can give you, or something you discover by playing around, until you slowly build up to something big.
Yeah, you set yourself up for analysis paralysis if you go too big. Because
absolutely. God, that never goes away. Analysis paralysis. Oh my God! Like when I have like tons of projects, whether it be modding or otherwise, and if I take a step back and look at the whole thing, I just won't be able to act, and I find myself opening YouTube to just pass time. But if I break down the project and get it into a workable chunk where it's just like, all right, I know I need to do these 10 steps, then I can go nuts and just go attack them.
Yeah,
so I don't think that
that's happening to me right now. I'm just starting a programming assignment on ray tracing today, where I have to like find the intersection of a ray on a 3D object, right? And and just starting it, I'm like, whoa, like what am I doing? But like, I have to dig into it and just do a small part first, and then I'll eventually get to the big parts where I'm doing Phong refractions and stuff, reflections.
It's always hard though, because it feels when you start to break the projects down into the little tiny pieces that you're gonna have to solve first. That always, at least me, I don't know if this is how everybody feels, but when I start looking at it, the smaller pieces, I get annoyed of like, I just want to get to the big picture. I just want to get to the big picture. But then when I'm actually in it, solving the little tiny problem, I actually find myself enjoying it. And it's like, I don't know what I was worried about. Like, this is actually fun to solve this little problem. And then the next layer of it is then, basically the same thing again, just at a bigger scale. And it's like, oh yeah, I get to use this knowledge to then build on that. And I don't have any clear examples to like make a metaphor for people listening who don't understand programming, but it is kind of funny how that goes, of like, you might fight yourself because you just want to work on the big picture, but then once you dive in and you actually have a clear idea of the smaller thing, it just makes it all kind of come together on its own.
Yeah, Nuclear Winter, I was like, how do I do thermodynamics in Fallout 4? Like, there's no... Weather doesn't really do anything, right? Like, I have to create this all from scratch, so what do? Like, well, it's... If you just do some if-else statements, or what I really did is I opened up Deimos, a little, like, graphing thing on Google, and I just created a little distribution, a little And then from there, you just start building those things into Papyrus. They can just be a simple variable, and they just change with weather, right? And eventually, you can just add more things on it. You add wetness, so a little property that changes it a bit, or you just build that all in, and eventually it becomes something big and dynamic.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's a great way to approach. I mean, that it's one of the reasons like game development I think is so fun, is because you're essentially trying to make simulations of things in real life, so you can use that to fill in the blanks. So like for example, you're trying to build something about cold. So anytime you get stuck on something, you're like, all right, well, let me just start simulating this part of life. Like use that to fill in the blanks.
Well, it's nice also when life did something for you, like when I was trying to figure out wind chill. Because you have wind speed and temperature in my mod, and I'm like, okay, so how do I use this in the calculation? Well, if you go into Google and you look up wind chill, there's a nice, neat formula for calculating wind chill. It's like, all right, I just a nice simple formula I input, and all right, now I got a good wind chill.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think I want to. I think I'm gonna make Nuclear Winter. So I'm right now I'm on a mission of playing the game every week to make sure I keep playing Fallout 4 so I don't lose touch with how it is. But I also need to keep the game fresh enough for myself that I don't, get bored of this plan. And I think Nuclear Winter is going to be in one of my next, if not my very next one, because I love the winter, like just looking at the way that plays and like having poked my head in for a second, like it's such a game changer. The visuals, and obviously I know you didn't do all the textures and everything. You tap into mods like NAC. But the combination of the two is just such a massive change.
Yeah,
like where even though you're going to the same locations, it just feels like a completely different game.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, right? Like the other thing is you don't have to do everything yourself sometimes. Like I have a lot of blocks in my technical ability, right? Like I don't know the modeling pipeline for Fallout 4. I don't know the
It's not particularly fun to learn.
yeah.
That is some scattered knowledge right there. Like there's only a couple people in the community who know the full breadth of it.
Yeah, I mean, I interact with a lot of them, but like, it's that kind of stuff. Like, I know that if I build something cool, then maybe I can get one of them to work with me. Now I know sometimes you actually will have to learn. Like, you actually like. For Nuclear Winter, if I wanted to create some new models, could I find someone to do it? Probably. But if I try and maybe make a simple model first, then I might be able to make other models, Like, I have some modeling experience in Maya, but I know this doesn't necessarily translate the easiest to 3ds Max and stuff, so, yeah.
Yeah, modeling is a particularly nasty skill to learn. There's a lot goes behind that, and then like animations, just taking that to the next level.
Yeah,
it's those are one of the things where I think a lot of people get hung up on with modding, because it's such a specific skill. Like it requires a large technical skill set and like knowing how to use the software, and then you also have to have artistic ability on top of it. It's so that's a one I tend to tell people to avoid that as their starting point. I think modeling is pretty. I think that's a bad one to start with. I think people should generally start with textures or coding. Like coding is way easier than 3D modeling.
Oh yeah,
like I think a lot of people probably are intimidated by programming. It is nowhere near as difficult as doing something like 3D modeling or animation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you're working with C, right? You don't have to make all the functions. In fact, there are lots of functions you won't be able to make, and you'll just have to use one. Right. In some ways, that's what I really like about Papyrus is it actually limits me in this box. And sometimes when I work in a box, right, like, you can learn everything about that box, and then you understand the limitations, and then you can try to go outside of that box, right? Which is like F4C.
Oh, I feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
I also, the other freedom of it is I don't feel, so like when I program in other languages that are fully open, I often feel like I'm not doing good enough work, where I'm like, did I extract this out far enough? Like, or abstract this out far enough? Like, did I use classes correctly? With Papyrus, you can't really do all that very much. So you don't ever, like, I feel like I spend more time solving the problem as opposed to trying to frame out my code, which is the enjoyable part. Like I know there are some people out there who really enjoy the planning of code to make it, perfectly flexible and easily injectable. I find that stuff to be, sometimes interesting, but most of the time I just find it to be that analysis paralysis thing where it's like, all right, well, I could abstract this out to infinity and I'm never going to get anywhere. Like, I'm never going to get anything done. But with Papyrus, because you're stuck in a tiny box, I tend to spend a lot more time just making things that work, which is a lot more fun.
Right, yeah. Maybe when you first outset, you might be like, oh, I can have this class, and then all these things branch off of it, and then I have this nice infrastructure. And then about midway through, everything is connected, and you have circular dependencies and all that kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Or then you find out it's like, oh, you can't run. Papyrus doesn't run that fast, and all of my excessive abstractions are just slowing down my code. Yeah. There's a lot of that happens too.
I do that a lot sometimes. Like, I'll write something pretty complicated, and then maybe like a week later or something, I'll go back and I'll be like, wow, if I redid this, I could probably do this in half as many lines of code, and it would probably run even better.
Yeah.
Or like I'll use Papyrus for things that I really could have done a lot easier just by doing something in the engine.
Oh yeah, I'm starting to learn that a lot with they've got there's certain systems that in the creation engine that are actually really well done and very fast that I have avoided because I'm just such a script junkie. But like their story system for firing events, or like their dialogue system and everything, like a lot of that stuff is designed to flow very quickly and like handle stuff that I would normally just set up my own logic for, and mine ends up running like crap. And so I've been doing a lot more experimenting with the built-in systems to try and get free of so much code, for a lot of reasons, but part of it was just to experiment, just to see like, why does Bethesda always do this with this event system? Like, this seems silly. Like, it seems like it'd be a lot easier to wrap your head around if you just did it in a few lines of code. But now I'm learning it's engine optimization, and I think also because they have a lot of people doing stuff who aren't scripters, so it's like they need that visual interface.
I mean, if you think about magic effects, you can do a whole lot of things with just magic effects that aren't related to magic effects at all, but can do a whole lot of really cool things.
Yeah. Oh man, for the I worked with AJ Hackra to do a fix for the lever action rifle a couple years ago, and like we were able to do it with magic effects. Like, it has nothing to do with magic, but it was just like, with the magic effect can detect how many bullets you have remaining, and then it's like all this these like crazy weird workarounds you've got to do.
Yeah, or like dynamic script attachment to NPCs, that kind of stuff. Like, it's not
through aliases and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, I think there's at least two ways you can do that. You can do it with aliases, but I think you can also. Though I think the way I do it is I have a special effect. Maybe. Okay. I think it's a quest that keeps turning on and off, and then it finds NPCs around you using a cloaking spell, and then it attaches and then the cloaking spell attaches a magic effect with a script on it, and then I just try to maintain that magic effect on the NPC for as long as they're like in the area, right? Like a 5,000 radius area, and their 3D is loaded. That's actually how I equip Gasmasks in Gasmasks of the Wasteland.
So you're like randomly searching for people and like, here you go, have a gas mask.
Yeah, because could I add it through leveled list? Sure, but like I wanted to be able to add other people's gas masks from other mods. So I have this like master list, and then I can just search through and be like, well, if you don't have a gas mask, all right, add this one to this person, and add a keyword to let them know that they're wearing a gas mask, and now you can shoot them in the head, and they're gonna start dying. And or like, a lot of that was just like figuring out how to get NPCs involved, right?
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of weird stuff when you're modding, because the like game engines generally are designed for a specific type of gameplay in mind, and so they'll put in the appropriate hooks to handle that gameplay. And then when you start stepping outside of that bounds, you have to get pretty clever with some of your implementations. So I think that's another one of those hard lessons to learn, is that there's not necessarily a direct path to build the thing you want, which is why I think it's so important when people are learning is to just play, to just get in there and just try and just take what's there and just try and tweak it a little bit. Like don't go, don't aim for the finish line, just aim for like, what can I do with this? And then, eventually you'll have a skill set to jump right to the, to that end goal. But it would for somebody who hadn't been experienced to figure out dynamically using a magic effect to equip gas masks, nobody would think of that. Like that's only comes from just like lots of experience and playing around.
Yeah, that took quite a bit of research. A lot of times when you're working on like on mods and things, it's basically like R&D. There are definitely people who know, but maybe you don't know them or they aren't available, so you're gonna have to do a bit of your own research and development and figure out what works and what doesn't work, and maybe what you thought didn't work does actually work. Like that just happened just the other day. I've had this really long running bug for Gasmasks of the Wasteland where the visual effect that the mesh that we play in front of the player's face that has the overlay. When you are changing location, this isn't every time you change location, but most of the time, it actually turns off the overlay. It removes the visual effect. So for a really long time, like even now, I still don't quite have this finished, but I would have to turn all of the effects off in front of your face and turn them all back on. And people would complain and be like, when I'm walking around, I see these weird flashes. It's like because it's all turning off and turning back on. Right. Because otherwise it just turns off, and then you're like, well, there's my immersion gone.
Right.
But I was talking to blah blah.
This is funny. You're talking to some of the same people, because I was talking to Cancerous recently, who had worked with blah blah on the vehicle stuff, and they had a similar problem of like models disappearing once they get past the cell limit of where that model appeared. Have you guys come up with a solution for this?
Well, blah blah actually did a very similar implementation, and and what he did was he attached the mesh to the camera, because at first I didn't really know that you could use nodes to attach effects to like different things, right? So
sure.
Once I started working on Nuclear Winter, I figured out, I can attach the effect node to the player camera, and it'll make it look like the effect is coming out of their mouth, right? Or when you go into third person, then you switch and you do a different effect and you attach it to their head. So he had done a similar thing, and he attached it to the camera, and it doesn't turn off when you change locations. It it works fine. He did this for the synthful outfit. Synthful outfit. So now I'm trying to recreate what he did. I'm still having trouble, but eventually, hopefully, it'll work as intended.
Yeah, one of the ideas I want to pursue with that is updating the set persist location. I think that's what this function is called. Is trying to call that every time you change cells to see if that would fix that particular issue with models disappearing, because that's it's a real pain in the butt, because there's a lot of cool stuff we could be doing if we had if these models would stay in the world once we place them there and attach them to things.
Yeah, I think the issue that my specific thing was having was I was attaching it to the camera and then I was orienting it, and I think something about those flags made it so they only persisted while they were in that cell. So once I actually turned those off, they didn't turn off anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, but this is one of those other things where it's just like by releasing stuff, like when people are just experimenting and releasing stuff, they start to other people who know this stuff in the community, like, know that you're taking it seriously, and then they're more willing to talk to you and share the knowledge that they have. Whereas if you just come at modding and you're aiming for something big, but you've never released anything, it can be a lot harder to get people to help you because they think you're an idea man. So
you don't want to come off as an idea man, because people aren't. Some people are not as nice as maybe we are, and they will tell you to go fly a kite, basically.
But yeah, there's a lot of knowledge you can just pick up and shortcuts that way by making friends due to the fact that you've shown that you're willing to put in the work. But I think also beyond that is there's so much knowledge that's available just by searching the internet. There's like a bunch of stuff people have documented out there, videos people put out there for whether it be Fallout 4 already or for other games where you can pick that knowledge up and solve the problem. So I think one of the biggest keys to being successful in modding is also being able to break down your ideas into their components so that you actually know what to search for. So like if you, like when you start planning out something like Gasmasks, like you obviously are trained to be a programmer. You're learning to break down problems into their components. Then you can take that idea of like, how would I equip guys dynamically in an area, and you can search for more the specifics. Because obviously, if you search for how do I make a mod that puts gas masks on everybody, that doesn't exist. No one's going to have that search term. But if you can like break it down into its smaller components, you're able to make those do that searching.
Yeah,
which is just a weird random side thing that is. It's tangential to being able to actually do any of the modding things. Just being able to take your problem and break it down into a more generically phrased term is a pretty important skill to have.
Yeah, small parts, right? I mean, like a lot of what you can learn. I mean, there's tutorials online, right? Like when I found out that creationkit.com had all this stuff on Papyrus, it has a whole list of all of the or most of the functions, and how to use them. It was like, well, all right, now I can do a whole lot of stuff because I have all these things at my disposal. And then you learn, you learn more, right? You learn that you can do custom events and properties and all those kinds of things.
So you mentioned earlier, and you had mentioned it to me the other day when we were chatting, that your brother is actually a Skyrim modder. What's that like to have a family member? I mean, like I find it rare that anybody I talk to in the mod community even has a RL friend who also mods, but you've got a sibling. Have you guys been doing this together like a lot of your lives? Like, was he also into the Warcraft modding, Starcraft modding, etc.?
Yeah. I wouldn't say we always work together, but sometimes we do come together. Like we'll have an idea and we'll be like, well, can you help me out with some of the programming on this? Like on his current project, Lordbound, I've definitely helped him out with some stuff. Maybe like since he's one of the main interior designers, sometimes I go and beta test his dungeons and stuff. He's definitely more on the level design side. Like that's his complete focus is level design. So
sure.
But having him in the house, right? Like we can kind of bounce ideas off each other, right? We'll be downstairs making a sandwich, and we'll just talk about what we're working on.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was getting at. Even outside of working together, just like having somebody to chat about this stuff, and you obviously then have the same passion, which has got to be kind of fun. Like if I went upstairs and tried to talk to my wife about Fallout modding, her eyes would glaze over really quickly. So
it's like you say, "What about code?"
Yeah, she just says she'll just say to my kid like, "Oh, Daddy's talking ones and zeros again." So it's hard to have a lot of conversation about it, but it's got to be fun to be able to chat about these ideas and talk about maybe the next thing you're working on, or just to get hyped, somebody to get hyped with.
Yeah, well, like I can present him a lot of new ideas that I learn as a result of working on my own mods, right? Like,
sure.
Like he's working on a lava level, and he wants these fireballs falling from the sky, like a rain of fire. And I was like, well, you could actually make those so they're shooting out of the ground. Also, you can make a volcano, right? And he's like, no, I couldn't do that because they travel in a straight line. Like, No, actually, if you go into these projectiles right here, you can actually make it so they lob. So, yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you guys you don't work on a ton of projects together, but you do get to communicate with each other and help each other out with ideas and stuff. So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, we both want to succeed. Both want each other to succeed, and we both want to get into the games industry. So we push each other.
Yeah.
Well, I telling them to get his stuff done. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, have you done much modding of Skyrim at all, even just for fun, like just played around in the editor?
I did level design with, like I said, when we were working together on a mod called Remnant of Kings, and we built a bunch of levels. Mostly
that's
him,
right, you did say that already.
Yeah. He
did
really
any of it get to a point?
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, obviously, if he's working on Lordbound, that's a pretty big mod coming up. I was just gonna say, did you guys get it to a point where it was like decent? Like, I know you said you never released it. Was it just like one of those projects, we were talking about earlier, when we're young, we're like, I want to build this cool quest mod and then play through it? Is it one of those where it's like it's a little wonky, but you're still proud of it because you got it working? Or is it like, yeah, maybe with a little more polish we could probably release this?
I'd say it had a really long way to go, just because neither of us really knew how to do anything quest related. So,
sure.
But we knew how to use the level editor, so we made a whole lot of really cool maps. And then I kind of fell off. I kind of had to do school related stuff, but he kept working on it, and he made a whole lot of levels, and actually a lot of those are now integrated in Lordbound in one way or another. Like, parts of them have been pulled out and put into new maps, or
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that kinds of stuff. So it didn't
get
get
to
away.
Some of your old work be brought back to life.
Yeah, I did actually work on one dungeon for Lordbound at one time, and that was a lot of fun. And then I ended up not working on other stuff just because I was working on Gasmasks, the Wasteland, in school. So
yeah, well, that'll be fun to see when that comes out.
Oh yeah, it's a really awesome project. I had a playtest for it yesterday, about 4 hours, and it is definitely coming along. Like, I played for 4 hours, and they said I wasn't even 5% the way through the main quest, and I was almost mainlining the main quest.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
And they have.
Did you feel like it was good, solid content, and it would not like filler? Because sometimes not even just mods, but games will overinflate things by giving you timed tasks or like tedious repeatable stuff. Is it pretty is it barren of that kind of thing, of filler? Does it feel pretty story driven?
There's like a little bit of filler, but it's not filler. It's filler in the sense that it like introduces you to the world more. Like, it makes you actually walk around and stuff like that, and the dialogue is pretty good and things like that. So I mean, it has a long way to go. It's definitely like an alpha, but I can see where it's going, and when they get there, it's going to be really cool.
Oh, it's good to hear. It's so fun to see these gigantic mods actually succeed, because it's kind of like that those crazy dreams you have when you're younger and you set down to mod, like, and then once you get experienced enough to realize, like, oh, these require a whole team of people, and coordinating a team of those people at the volunteer level is a big challenge. So like, whenever they succeed, I get so hyped, like, for my own projects too, because I'm like, yes, see, it can be done. I've definitely been on some of those teams for other games in the past where we were trying to do like big overhauls of FPSs, and they eventually would fall apart for one reason or another because they were overzealous. And now I've learned a big lesson from that, and and that's why, like, Sim Settlements for the most part gets developed in chunks. So, like, we do the expansion packs or the regular patches, is just because I know that you set the goal too large and too far out, that keeping the everybody around long enough to get to that point is pretty challenging, because there's no money or anything like that to keep people moving. And so those big projects, when they happen, it's almost a miracle.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like, you have to be so organized in those big projects. Like, there are several game developers on that team, and they really keep it together. They keep it tight. Like they want it to be as professional as they can, right? Because it's
right.
It's a reflection on them as game developers, and they just want to create something really cool. Because as much as they work on other games, right? Things like Skyrim and the Bethesda games are really cool games they would like to work on. So
right. That was actually what turned me off from going into the games industry, of being explained that I would have to go through working on, because at the time when I was looking to do it, there was still a lot of those like movie video, like they tried to make a game after every movie, or like every kids show, and so there were just a lot of garbage games being developed, and that was what fresh out of college people had to work on. I was like, I don't want to do that. That's I think there's probably a lot less of that. There's a lot. I mean, there are in the mobile space. There's a lot of garbage games still being produced.
A lot of mobile games, yeah, for sure.
But I think in the console and PC space, it's generally like it's gotten winded down to where I think if you work for any of the major studios, you're going to be working on something pretty cool. Maybe the individual piece you're working on is a little boring. Like the people doing background assets are probably not as excited as the people who are designing the main characters and stuff. But you can still be proud to be working on anything that's being produced by most big studios now.
Yeah, I mean that's what I've said in most of my like cover letters and things. It's like yeah, sure, I'll be working on QA or whatever, but like, is that the most exciting job? Well, I get to see the game break a whole lot, but but I mean, the point is, I respect the IP and I love the work that I'm being a part of something big and cool, right? So even if I'm doing something that isn't the most engaging, it's totally fine. I'm enjoying the process.
Well, I see a lot of people in game companies when you hear about their stories, and I don't know how much of this has to do with the timelines of game development, of it becoming more of a mainstream thing, but a lot of people, even at higher level in studios, started out as QA. Like I think that's a common way to get in, because they need a lot of people to do that, and you get exposed to a lot of different parts of game design, and you get a chance to talk to the rest of a lot of the development team. So you get you're going to be interacting with coders and artists and all sorts of people to give them feedback, and you kind of will start to pick up some of their workflow and learn some of the stuff that they're doing, and so it's probably a great place to go to network and just learn more about how it's actually done in the industry.
Yeah. Some of what I hear on that is that that's not really the case anymore, because these games are getting so complicated that they need more competent, like professional QA, right? Not just like not just people fresh out of college.
Sure.
But I think for maybe some of the more old school game devs, that might be still the case, kind of, because they are looking for and for maybe some indie, right? Because they might not be able to get the talent they need. So
right. Well, I mean, QA obviously, like even at the AAA level, they do not have the QA they need, like the quality. There's still bugs going out in every game. But I mean, part of that is just that the complexity of systems that we demand as players now. Like every game has to be shipped with so many systems that are expected to just work out of the box, because we're just used to these, quality of life changes over time, or some game like just rethinks a genre, and like all of a sudden now every game has to have this new feature. Of all of those things interacting with the rest of the game have potential to break, and I think that's why most game companies are switching to this early access crap. Is that it's essentially a way to get free testing free and well, and it's almost I kind of see why they do it, because like the QA people who are in QA think a certain way and they do things a certain way, and they understand, they start to learn how games function, and they're very aware of the gamification of things. And they also don't have the incentives to try and cheat necessarily. So like when players are investing themselves into like one of these live service games, they're looking for ways to gain an edge, and they're actually committed to that because they know that they will get that on their character in perpetuity. Whereas, there's something about that mindset if you're just in QA of like, all right, well, I know how programming works. I know what these potential pitfalls and bugs could be, and they'll search for those, but they're never going to put in the amount of hours to solve the problems. It's kind of like the problem that is perpetual in the security industry of like, the hackers are always going to put in more effort than the security experts because they have a prize to gain, whereas it's hard to determine when you've done enough on the security side. It's kind of the same idea of like, you almost could do that forever of QA iteration. You could literally just keep going in circles over and over again, trying to think of little holes, and you'll never ever
you'll
go
never get
as
them
far
all.
as the right. You'll never get them all. There's always going to be the incentive for people on the other side to keep trying to get past what you assumed anyone would be capable of doing. And so like it almost seems like I hate the fact that it's early access in the sense that it seems like not only are they getting free QA, but they're also releasing unfinished content.
Yeah,
that's not great.
The games that come out that are like sort of like more like an alpha.
Right.
I'm usually not involved in those kinds of games, just not because I don't think they're interesting, but I just usually prefer a complete product when I actually go to play them. Of course, It's different if I'm part of the team, right? Like,
right.
But it doesn't. It seems like a little bit of a waste of my time, right? If I buy a game and then I have to go
then you guys
fight against the game.
Yeah. I do think that there are certain levels at this level of complexity where you kind of need that. You need to throw 1 million people at it to find those little edge cases.
Oh, but, for sure. I think that's part of also one of the reasons why people with Fallout 76 like why didn't you beta test earlier? Like why did you?
Right, we were all hungry to test for you. Like,
or why did you beta test like a month before release?
Yeah.
But of course, it's hindsight's 2020.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, well, I think if we're talking about QA, like maybe not working the way that I've heard it works in the past of something like modding is probably a fantastic resume point to be like, I have actually done, built some games in a professional engine. I understand a lot of course concepts, and like to where, when you go to those game companies, they're looking for somebody with a little more experience. Having some of the experience to understand and talk about, potential pitfalls and bugs to watch out for, having that experience, I think is probably a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking out for developers to actually talk to on stuff like this because, I do have mods on my resume, but I don't really have that many, any games on my resume to say that I've completed all by myself, right? Like, so sure. You'll talk to some developers and they'll say, well, you should be building a lot of small games because they show that you know how to do things all by yourself, right? You can do it all. You can
right.
And then others will say that mods are nice because they show that you do know how to work on a professional engine and stuff like that. Well, especially obviously if you're going to apply for the right. company that made the game, right? Like that's a big plus. Of course,
if you're already familiar with a lot of their dev tools. I would say that I think the days of needing devs that know everything are probably behind us. Like, I think there's way too much specialization that goes on anymore. That I think that I would say that's bad advice. Even as a professional software developer, I am rarely ever looking for help from a jack of all trades. Like, it's usually like, all right, I need help from an SQL guy, or like I need help from a server. Like I need very specific tasks done that are hyper specialized knowledge is what I find, and I can't imagine it's not the same in the games industry. In fact, when I talked to the Rizzler, he was talking about he's researched into this and recognized that most like first person shooter game companies have like a team, all they do is work on the shooting mechanics because it's that important to the gameplay, and so like you get that specialized. So I think that I wouldn't say you would need to be targeting being a jack of all trades necessarily. Like it does show that you're the go get 'em type of person, and that you're willing to problem solve, definitely, if you can do all those. But I don't think you need to learn. You don't need to be the guy who can do like art and UI and scripting and your own sound work. Like, I don't think anybody's looking for that.
Yeah, sometimes that's also the opposite is also the problem, though, that at least what I've seen from trying to apply to some of these companies is they do want very specific things and they want you to be an expert at them.
Right.
And I can say, well, I've been at university and I've worked with C, C++, Java, C, JavaScript, Python. Am I an expert at any one of these? Not necessarily. Maybe a little better at C++, but yeah.
I think they tend to, most companies tend to like shoot for the moon with their resumes. They're like, all right, in the ideal world, we could get this for half the price it's worth, and this is our dream list of things, because it'll always be very specific. Usually, it's like we need somebody with experience doing tools in this language, preferably with experience in these random 3 side languages. Like it's always very
do you know
bizarre,
Lua, Ruby, and Python?
Right. Yeah, it's clearly like they basically like asked the last guy who worked there, like, what stuff do you know? And then they just fill out the job requirements with that, whatever their last guy happened to use. And it's not always strictly necessary. One of the guys that my wife used to work with has quoted saying this to her several times, which I always liked, which is like, if you think you're 60% ready, you're ready. So like if you can meet 60% of the requirements on a job post, you should probably apply for it, because you can kind of bend your existing experiences to match up with what they need, or at least you should be familiar enough with the core topic if you're at 60%, that you should be able to not necessarily BS your way through, but at least answer honestly about the things you don't know, and then show them how your existing experience could match up with it.
Yeah, and I mean, once you know that you have an interview, right, you can easily brush up on the topics, right? Right, like you can learn a lot in a couple days, like
right. Yeah, especially, I mean, that's all like what we've been talking about with the modding stuff, is just like learning all these tools. Like at first it's intimidating, but at the end of the day, you just play around for a few days, and then suddenly you're at like you're 50% of the way there. It's like, oh, okay, well I got past wrapped my head around some of these core mechanics, and now I suddenly feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, I think the most recent example of that was I was on the author chat because I wanted to apply to one of these companies, and they require knowledge of Perforce, and I was like, I have no idea what Perforce is. So I was like, I Google it, and it's a version control and stuff like that, but then I download it and I'm like, oh, this is sort of like Git, right? And I'm familiar with Git, so yeah, those are the kinds of things that I ran into so far on my journey to becoming a game developer.
Stuff like that, like the Git, it's super intimidating, and there's always features like that you'll think that maybe like, oh, I'm gonna have to understand all this, and it's like most people don't need to understand all that. Like usually what I find is there'll be one guy at a company who knows like all the little details about a particular software your team uses. Everybody else just needs to know like the basics. Like you just have to be competent enough to like not break things. And then you ask that guy,
can you push and pull
for the details? Right, exactly. And the same thing with like stuff like Perforce and stuff. So yeah, a lot of that stuff it's way more intimidating sounding than it needs to be. And sometimes you just gotta like just poke your head in and watch the 5 beginner tutorials you find, and you've got enough knowledge to move forward.
Yeah, software-specific terminology.
Right. Yeah, just brush up and you'll be there.
Yeah.
But well, man, I wish you luck in finding a job. I think the stuff you're producing so far is very, very good. I really appreciate that you put in all the time and commit to your projects to like get them to that level of polish that you've done so far, and I can't wait to see what happens with Nuclear Winter in that regard, because like I said, Gasmasks of the Commonwealth I think is one of the most underrated mods on the Nexus right now. I think yours should be one of those permanent top 10 with what a big change it has in the feel of the game and just the level of polish you put in. Like are there, well, let me touch on this before we break, is there anything, because I know for the most part you guys have wrapped up Gasmasks, is there anything that's in it that feels a little rough to you that if you had the right people or the right ability and to change the engine that you would tweak still in that?
What would I change? Well, actually, I mean, most of what the new things I just learned are kind of the things that I really wanted to fix, because Gasmasks has always had a problem with like running into a lot of bugs, mostly because I was brand new to it, right? So a lot of it is me figuring everything out as I go along. Like, so I make bugs and then I learn more and then I learn how to fix them and those kinds of things. So there's always new systems that you could add to that stuff, right? Like I could expand Gasmasks of the Wasteland even more, right? I could add a ton of new features, but of course, like, you get ambitions for other things. Like, we all have lists of mods that we would like to make, right?
Right.
Like, I would love to make a mod that replaces caps with bullets, right? So it's like Metro, where you have to it's an economy equalizer. If you're shooting, you're spending your resources. So we all have
those are the type of thing that is going to be like such a massive overhaul. Stuff like that is so complicated or it's so simple, and like you could implement that fairly easily. Yeah. But like I think the problem there is that a lot of people don't think about it, is that the repercussions of that, like how many systems then you have to change and correspond in response to that, like once you start playing it and feel it, is that like that's where real deep game design stuff happens, I think.
Yeah, my knowledge of the game engine is really what helps me when I think of that stuff. Like, could I have done it before? Like, I think, like, no, like, caps are probably hard-coded somehow, right? But then you realize, well, I don't really necessarily have to replace caps, right? I can implicitly, every time a cap is added to my inventory, just replace it with a bullet or a round of some kind, right?
Sure.
So you don't necessarily replace the whole system.
Right.
You just change it so that it works differently.
Yeah. So there's stuff you could go infinitely down the rabbit hole of adding new things you could do. But I think the other side of that, even beyond just the idea of taking up all of your time, is that there's also diminishing returns in how much people enjoy additional deeper features of like I had this problem with Red Dead Redemption 2 of that, like I thought they went a little too far with all the mini game stuff. Like, I don't want to take a bath. Like, I don't have time. Like, that's cool that you did that, but I don't care. Like, I don't have the time to get involved with that. Like where you can take things too far too, to where it's where a lot of people don't care or don't want to engage at that depth and complexity.
Yeah, or you just become too complacent, right? Like, I found that's one thing I found with Gasmasks is I did work on it for a really long time, but I still want to work on it, and I always get these pangs in the back of my head, like, I'd like to go back and fix these things. But at the same time, you become too complacent, right? You are okay to work on a project for so long that you're like, well, I could have made 5 other projects in the time that it took me to, do these little things to find all these bug fixes, And
sure.
Maybe you limit yourself in terms of growth, right? You're not learning as many new things just because you're repeating the same things. So
yeah. So you have nothing in like pressing that you're looking at that you feel like it's a pretty whole. Because I think it's a great whole project as is. I just was curious if there were things that you were still hoping for that you hadn't had a chance to, or like maybe there's something about it now where your own abilities or the engine itself has limited you from doing it in a way you wanted. Was there anything like that, or are you proud of what it is as is?
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of how it is right now. I consider it feature complete for sure. There's a lot of things I do have a list of like features that I could have added or that people had suggested to me. But then I just started becoming so infatuated with the Nuclear Winter idea. So now I have this list of things I'd like to implement for Nuclear Winter, right?
Right.
So eventually it was just the creative side that just pushed me to go onto another mod. And I had this framework, right? So Gasmasks of the Wasteland has a lot of code. And sometimes you can reuse that for completely new things like Nuclear Winter. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, on behalf of the community, thank you for putting in all the effort you do. It's rare that you see mods that are as polished as that, and that's why I keep harping on that and saying people need to go download it, is because a lot of mods suffer from having rough edges or feature incompleteness where they don't feel like a total package. And your stuff seems to break that mold, and you're one of the rare mod authors who puts out stuff that feels like a complete game system and feels like it could mesh completely in with the vanilla game. And I personally, that's one of my favorite types of mods. So thank you for putting in all the effort you do.
Thank you too. I mean, you create some wonderful stuff yourself. I mean, Sim Settlements is no walk in the park.
Oh, it's so rough though. That's one of those ones where you're talking about you get stuck on something. I'm gonna be stuck on Sim Settlements for a long time just because I am not proud of it yet. There's still too much to do there. But
yeah. See, we all feel that way about stuff.
It never ends. The grasp at perfection.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been great talking with you. Is there anything you want to talk about as far as your upcoming stuff or your projects, or any other projects you've got working on that you want to talk about to people?
Well, obviously for Nuclear Winter, I'm gonna get started on working on that settlement system once I end the university year. Right, have exams and pressing projects right now, but
sure.
Once those are done, I will definitely get into the swing of working on my let's say Frostpunk-esque settlement system, and that's really my next focus for sure. I'm excited to work on it.
Very excited for that. I think that's going to be awesome, especially like we had a chance to talk about it in text, and we did voice too. Some of the stuff you get coming sounds really exciting, and I'm a huge fan of Frostpunk, so seeing some of those features make it into the settlement mode will be fantastic.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. But other than that, that's most of my stuff.
Well, I can't wait to see what you do with it in the future, and I think it's going to be a star of one of my playthroughs soon. So awesome. All right, we'll talk later, man.
All right. Thank you for having me.